Hey, do you want to know how to refactor your brain and advance your DevOps engineering career? If so, you're in for a special treat. Today we have Dagna joining us to talk all about her new book, Brain Refactor, Optimize Your Internal Code to Thrive in Tech and Engineering and get more success, fulfillment, money, opportunity, impact, and growth. That's a large, large promise, but she delivers. So you'd want to listen all the way to the end to find out more. If you don't know, Dagna is an engineer turned coach for engineers and basically works with ambitious professionals in tech. She has over 10 years of coding experience and coaching since 2019. She takes the tough love approach where she's been in your shoes kind of coach. She has a lot of great reviews if you check her out on her coaching as well. So if this is something you're interested in, we'll definitely have links for that down below as well. And she helps her clients reach their potential and reach more and more exciting career opportunities by learning how to refactor their brains. Really interesting book and concept. You don't want to miss it. Check it out. Hey, Dagna, welcome to the Guild.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So really curious right off the bat, how did you get into coaching? Because obviously you're a coder, you probably, love doing it, but then do you still do coding, and how did you get into this coaching piece then?
Yeah. So I don't code anymore unless I need to tweak my website. The reality is that I loved solving problems and chasing bugs and figuring out why things didn't work. And now I do the exact same thing, just in a different domain, right? Before I used to dive into written code that was somewhere on the computer. Right now I dive into code that's part of the mental legacy code base in my clients. So it's kind of the same thing, and I still do what used to excite me. But in that realm of software engineering career, the reality is I burned myself out. And back in 2019, it was this kind of difficult moment where I ended up having a conversation with my manager. I burst into tears and figured out, okay, this isn't working anymore. My job used to bring me a lot of satisfaction, and that kind of faded away. And I felt like a cog in a machine. I felt like what I did didn't matter. I didn't want to wake up in the morning. And then on top of that, there were some other issues I was dealing with at the time. And I ended up in talk therapy. And within a couple of months of having conversations with someone who got me, who got my issues, I like to kind of compare that therapy setting to debugging sessions, because that's exactly what we did. And I saw how much my life and my perspective changed, and I slowly started getting back that motivation to waking up in the morning, to being alive, to getting things done, to looking for meaning and purpose. And so I realized that's when it clicked. My entire career, I chased impact. And after I worked with that therapist, I was like, whoa, this is the kind of impact I want to have on other people's lives. And that basically solidified my transition out of the engineering into the coaching.
Love it. Love it. And you actually have a chapter on overcoming burnout that we're going to go over soon. But before we do, just want to follow up on, so do you find that a lot of people want to switch careers, but they have guilt about it for some reason? Like they feel almost like I'm stuck. I'm a coder. I'll always be a coder. There's nothing else I can do type deal.
I mean, that's part of the reason for sure. But let's look at engineering and tech in general. Like, that's a cushy job with great benefits. And I like to kind of compare it to golden handcuffs. It's really hard to let that go, especially if you're providing for a family, or you have kids, or you have elderly parents that you're taking care of. So, you are in a situation where other people depend on you, and it might feel too risky or scary to kind of jump into different waters or test out like a different career. However, as we're going to talk about probably in my book, what I talk about, it's really about the programming of your legacy mental code. So if you can reprogram the models of what is risky or what is beneficial or what it is that you truly really want outside of the expectations of your family or society or your own expectations from the past, whenever you can refactor that thinking, you start seeing things differently. And so you start acting differently, and your world potentially can change. So when I was transitioning I am a pretty risk averse person. And one of the things that I did with my husband is we saved up money and invested it in two rental properties. So that way we would have some income while I was figuring things out and had the kind of runway to experiment, establish my business. That was back even before COVID hit, but that was really helpful to have that kind of side income that was fueled by that golden handcuffs job. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. And if you start in 2019, you're at the 5-year mark. So most businesses don't make it that far. So obviously, what you cover in this book actually works. So let's dive into it.
That's right. Let's go.
The so it's I think the book is broken into two main parts, and it's 8 chapters. So I thought maybe we'll do a teaser for each chapter, so people definitely can get the book and the link down below, and then see where it takes us.
Awesome. Okay, let's do that.
Cool. So the first chapter is the source code of the mind. What would you say this chapter is mainly about?
It's part of part one. In part one, I explain how the human mind is basically similar to computer software. And as you know from your own experience, Joe, whenever we have any sort of code base, any sort of project, and something's not working, what do? We dive into the code and change what's not working. So I took the psychological concepts and theories that are proven that work, and I just reframed it, and I used the programming speak, the one that resonates with engineers. Because a lot of the time when I work with clients, and I gotta own it, I was just like that too. When there was a situation that you had to like analyze your emotions or feelings, it's like, ugh, I don't want to do that. Like, let's talk about facts, right? Because that's the language of our analytical minds. So what I did is I translated what I know works from psychology realm, but I put it into the programming speak, the engineering speak, the one that resonates with our analytical minds that are fact-based.
All right. So another thing you cover in this chapter is refactoring. How does refactoring apply to this chapter?
Yeah. So whenever you dive into any legacy code base, let's imagine you're a new engineer, you're hopping on into a new code base. You have to kind of figure it out, how everything works, how things are connected. And your first thing is fixing a bug. You go in, you start fixing things, and notice that there are some lines or files or classes or objects that need to be updated, that need the refactor in order for you to be able to fix the bug. And in terms of the mental legacy code, it's basically, instead of files and lines of code, we're talking about memories. We're talking about your thoughts. We're talking about your beliefs, because that's where that mental legacy code is stored. And a lot of the time, if you think about it, as code bases evolve, what happens? There are bugs. We sometimes patch things up just so the business side is happy and things work again. But that patch comes back to bite us and is no longer serving the project anymore and is causing more issues. The same thing applies to the mental programming. Let's say when you were a child, you had an older, louder sibling that scared you. So you like to hide and like just be out of their way so they wouldn't bother you or pester you. And that kind of a patch worked very well in that particular time frame of your life. But now that you grew up, you need to be seen in order to be recognized as a professional that you are. And so it's very critical to refactor that kind of patch, that kind of inefficiency, that kind of a code smell, right? That could be causing your issues, obstacles, like not being able to get promotion. So that's kind of how it works.
Love it. All right. So once someone like goes over their source code, they get an understanding of maybe things that they may be struggling with. How do you know it's not real, but how aware are actual people to how they perceive themselves and how others? I think in chapter 2, you then go over decoding feedback from a programmer's perspective. So you have things like feedback and peer reviews. So how does someone take what they learned in chapter 1 and then actually validate whether or not, based on feedback from their peers, it's in line or jives with what they think they need to work on.
Yeah.
I don't know if that
So
makes sense.
in the very first chapter, we kind of lay out the theory, right? In the second chapter, we start getting into some actionable advice because if you think something's not working, if there's an obstacle or challenge in front of you, you perhaps have not been open to receiving the feedback that was being thrown at you at all times, right? And I can guarantee that you did receive some sort of feedback that was beneficial, but you were just not paying attention. And the reason I can say that, and I'm so sure of it, is because I've been in exact same situation. So when I moved from Poland to United States, because of my Eastern European upbringing and a different cultural communication style, I would move here to the southern part of United States. I'm in North Carolina, and people would tell me, "Dagna, you sound rude, mean, aggressive," and I was like, Psh, "You're just being sensitive, okay, right?" Because in my mind, that kind of communication style served me my entire life that I lived in Poland, and there was no issues with that. And I did work as an engineer in Poland as well, and there was no issues with that particular setting. It's only after I moved and not immediately I realized that that cultural impact and communication impact was critical to me having an obstacle in my career and not getting promoted. And I mean, that makes sense when I look back at it. Because I came across as a mean person, people did not want me to be their team lead or their manager or their leader because they were like, do I want to have this mean person to be my boss? Not really, you know? And I can see it now, but back then, because my ears were closed off to feedback, number one, the words that I was told. Number two, also the situation that I was in, not getting the promotion. That was feedback in itself, but I didn't see it back then. So
That is a great example. How do you receive feedback without getting offended then? I have thin skin, so if I get feedback, sometimes I feel like I'm being attacked. I don't know why. It's some sort of mental issue that I probably need to work out in this book. But how do you take that feedback and use it not to be offended, but to make you grow?
yeah. So it's important to understand how the mental configuration of the mind works, right? The fact that you perceive it as an attack, it's part of your configuration setup. That's really created by the evolution. Back in the day, if someone attacked you verbally, your standing within your tribe could have caused you to be kicked out, and then you would have no resources to survive, right? So it's a kind of survival mechanism. And in order to understand why your defenses are coming up, is good to kind of keep in mind how our minds evolved and the fact that they're just not adapted to the modern times, right? We want feedback to grow, but our brains are optimized for survival, not really for growth. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love it. So I guess then the next chapter is the brain refactor algorithm, where
Oh, yeah.
you then kind of can work on a new response maybe than what you're used to. Maybe a little background with this chapter, and we'll dive in a little bit.
So, with this particular algorithm that I outlined in the book, there's 5 steps plus a caveat that explains merge conflicts. And the thing about the book is that the following chapter 4, 5, 6, and 7, they essentially take the brain refactor algorithm and put it into a particular use case of my own in case of burnout, and then my former clients who have applied the brain refactor algorithm and the outcomes that they got. So here are the 5 steps that you want to take whenever you're refactoring your brain using the algorithm. Number one is you want to identify root causes. You want to understand why things are not working. And this is where we get after we have accepted that there are things that are not working and that we are actually receiving feedback that will allow us to grow. In step number 2, we plan out the refactor. So we start replacing things, just like you said, Joe. We are going into, okay, I'm getting my defenses up when someone gives me feedback, to how would I rather be and act. What would I rather feel in that moment? What would I rather think in that moment? And that's part of your planning phase in step number 2. In step number 3, we want to script new responses. These are the kind of responses that you could think of basically as scripts that will interrupt what your OS is currently kicking off in the background completely subconsciously, right? So you might be noticing, okay, Dagna, Joe, we're having a one-on-one. Joe is noticing Dagna's being a little mean. She's leaning into her Polish side and being too direct. And you start noticing maybe your breath is getting more shallow. Maybe there's tightness in your chest. Maybe you start noticing that your body language is trying to like protect you and you're shrinking physically. And if you're able to essentially capture that in your conscious mind and interrupt it and be like, no, 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 no. I know she has good intentions. I know it's just her lack of skills. I know she means well and this will help me grow so I can take a deep breath and relax. This is your new script. And you have to manually execute it until it sinks in. In step number 4, we want to build libraries of evidence. And in step number 5, we want to continuously execute. And I know we were talking, in your intro, you were talking about the DevOps Toolchain, and we love to think about deployment. But in terms of the legacy mental code, unfortunately, deployment is more of a continuous execution. It's not really a one and done kind of thing where you deploy the code and it's already out there.
Well, it's interesting about legacy code. A lot of times you don't want to touch it, but in order to get better, you're going to have to. So, how do you do that? I guess therapy would help, but anything else?
Yes, absolutely. Therapy and coaching are phenomenal. And the main difference in therapy and coaching are the, how do I call it? The main difference between therapy and coaching would be the focus, right? So therapists are educated to bring you from like if you were to put your mental performance or health or mental state on a scale of -5 to 5, therapy is bringing you from -5 to around 0 to that normal, quote unquote, healthy state. While coaching is more interested about bringing you to your peak performing self. So taking you from the 0, normal, regular, healthy state to your potential, to the +5. So in that sense, they're complementary, and there are great ways to improve that. Now, there are ways that you can improve your hardware too. With brain, some things that improve the hardware of your brain, like the actual physical structure, would be diet, would be exercise. There's this new thing coming up called neurobics, which is type of exercise for brain in order to make it better, more efficient and whatnot. But my favorite way of updating the hardware of the brain is actually doing a neurofeedback training. It's this also called QEEG biofeedback training. And it's this relatively new-ish way of training your brain that improves its hardware. And it's super easy. As a client, you essentially go into your meeting and watch TV, and your brain improves itself on a hardware level.
Wow, that's cool. So that's something that you would, as part of coaching, if someone's to take coaching with you, they learn these type of techniques that you just mentioned?
Yes, absolutely. And I recommend it to all my clients. This is not something that I do, but I've tried it on myself and it worked tremendously. So I recommend it.
Very cool. All right. So the next chapter, I think, is once again, I don't know if it's just engineers or maybe just some in engineering. I just see it more. People deal with imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So chapter 4 goes into debugging imposter syndrome. Maybe a little background around this chapter, why you put it in here, why it's important.
You know, the 4 chapters that we're about to dive into are the 4 common career obstacles that I see over and over and over and over again. And I've seen that for my clients and myself. After we were able to refactor these out, then is when the promise of the book kicked in. You know, they were able to experience more success fulfillment, more money, better job opportunities, getting finally that promotion, getting unstuck, getting opportunities and growth in their career. So it's really about getting the common bugs out. And those common bugs are imposter syndrome, burnout, trouble dealing with other people, and self marketing struggles. So, how about I read a little sneak peek from the book? Okay, so in my book, on the imposter syndrome, I talk about the imposter syndrome and compare it to growing pains because I feel that imposter syndrome is often overused in our industry. A lot of the time we feel just regular doubt or worry, or we feel like overwhelmed with new responsibilities for a brief moment, and we label that imposter syndrome, but that's not what it is, right? It's really the kind of set of routines that go into overdrive. You could imagine while one loop getting executed in your mind, and that's the imposter syndrome. You get stuck in it, and it's really hard to get out without any break condition. So here's an example. I mentioned this imaginary engineer, Linda, who has 5 years of experience under her belt. She's been 2 years in her new job. And in order to draw out that difference between imposter syndrome and growing pains, here's her story. She's been working real hard with leading her new team. It's her new role as a team lead. But unfortunately, there has been an outage, and it was caused by a feature that her team has shipped. So now her confidence has crumbled, and now her internal programming will determine if the challenge of her new role is overwhelming or if it's beneficial. Okay, let me start reading. The outcome has nothing to do with the situation itself, the major failure causing an outage, and everything to do with how her mental programming interprets the event. Either imposter syndrome will take over, allowing the overwhelm to kick in, or she can lean into the growing pains and experience a transformative growth spurt. What happens next all depends on the internal mental programming that assigns meaning to what's going on around her. If Linda's legacy mental code is running the imposter syndrome routines, she might think, I knew I wasn't cut out for this role. I've just been fooling everyone and now it's blown up right in my face. Everyone probably thinks I'm incompetent now. I can't believe I let this happen. I shouldn't have been promoted. I am not capable of handling this level of responsibility. My luck has run out. I am not skilled enough for this job. It's clear that I don't belong here. That's how her thinking essentially looks like if we were to log all of her thoughts and print them out. That's probably how it will look like if she is experiencing imposter syndrome. However, if Linda's mental code allows her to lean into the growing pains, she'll probably think something like this. That was a major setback, but it's all part of the learning process. I just need to figure out what went wrong and how to prevent it in the future. And even though this failure is tough to swallow, I know it doesn't define me, my abilities, or my worth. I gotta be real. I am new to this role and I haven't found my footing yet. I'm facing new challenges, the kind I haven't faced before, and failures are inevitable. But I've overcome challenges before. I'm capable of learning from those mistakes and improving. So I'm going to stay focused, stay positive, seek feedback, and keep moving forward. Now, notice the event didn't change, right? The failure causing outage happened. But the thoughts she's thinking, the meaning her internal mental code assigns to what happened is what affects her behavior and actions from that point onward, creating a completely different set of career outcomes.
All right. So it's beautiful, but I would think it's very difficult. For example, we tell ourselves a lot of BS stories, I think, internally
Oh,
in
yeah.
this dialogue. I was an introvert and afraid until like I was in my 40s. So, how do you overcome it then? Is it positive affirmations? Is it stages that you have to go to get there? Or is it
I
just like a
mean,
light
look
bulb
at you,
moment?
Joe, now. You have a
That's right.
podcast. You're a podcast host. So,
That's
one thing
true.
I really want to point out is being an introvert has nothing to do with the kind of skill you have.
Hmm.
Like, sure, it might be easier for you to acquire the people skills if you're extroverted, or it might be harder for you if you're introverted. But the fact is, being introverted or extroverted is more about where you get the energy from rather than how your skill set grows. And you can be intentional about it, right? I mean, what brought you into podcasting, Joe? How did you overcome being the introverted self?
I wanted to improve my communication skills to get over it. So I started the podcast just to force me to speak with people. And, 10 years later, here I am still.
There you go. So you
Right.
have built the skill, right?
Mm.
And you're still an introvert, aren't you?
Yep, absolutely.
Exactly. So
100%.
nothing really has changed. It's just that you were missing those skills.
Oh.
And if you think about it, a lot of engineering careers or education don't give us those people skills, right? I see it all the time with my college educated clients versus my bootcamp educated clients that got into tech and are doing programming. And honestly, because bootcamp grads usually have a former career that had them more exposed to those people skills, tend to have a level of people skills and ramp up really quickly with their technical, but there's a balance, right? Like they're dangerous enough with their technical skill set that they know what's going on or whom to outsource it to, or, what to do in order to get things done, but they have the people skills necessary in order to keep moving their career forward. With college grads, and that's me, I've been there too. It's a major struggle because of how we're being educated. We tend to overvalue that technical skill set and we tend to put it on a pedestal. And it's fun and interesting and mentally challenging. And, we're often curious to just solve the technical problems because it drives us, right? And the people skills are just like missing from the educational agenda and we ignore them or overlook them. And unless you've been lucky to have a manager in your career or a teammate who had those skills that you could model after and learn from, you have this massive gap. So one of the first things that I do with my college educated clients is to help them see the gap because it's just a skill set, right? And we're trying to, whenever we start working together, whenever I work with my clients one-on-one, we are shining the light on what's really needed in order to progress in your career. And you could say, Dagna, but I don't want to be a manager, so I don't really have to care about people's skills. But hey, guess what? In order to be a staff engineer, in order to be an architect, in order to become a CTO, you have to be able to efficiently collaborate with others, lead them. And those people soft skills are really crucial, are really critical, right? So one way I also like to think about it in terms of coding and legacy mental code is whatever obstacle you think you're facing, the reality is the obstacle is you and how you think about the problems that you're facing.
I love that. And I know you have a whole chapter on dealing with other people as well that probably can help people. So I could talk about debugging imposter syndrome for the whole episode. So I just want to touch on the final chapters here. I guess the one we started off with that you mentioned is burnout, overcoming burnout. How much of this is due to, like, in this industry, like the hustle culture, like not putting in all the work that you talked about, the brain refactoring and just saying, I'll just work more, I'll work harder and not addressing maybe underlying issues?
Yeah, you have to dive into the code though, because if you don't dive into the code, you're not going to understand why you keep doing those things to yourself, right? In my case, there were three major anti-patterns that I absorbed just from modeling what I grew up around, right? So one of the things was perfectionism, which is setting the boundary so high I could never really reach it and feel good about myself growing. It was about the destination, not the journey, which was a major flaw that caused me to stress out for no reason. And then I also had the anti-pattern code that I call hard work bias, where you tend to overvalue what's difficult or complicated or hard. And sometimes what's important for your career, it's easy. It's stupidly easy. Maybe like a copy-paste task, but for a client who brings in millions of dollars to your business, right? So being able to balance that perspective and stop valuing the things that are hard all the freaking time can be extremely beneficial to an engineer's career. And the last, a really big anti-pattern was lack of boundaries. If you think about this in terms of DevOps, whenever you're releasing a product, you at least want to manually test it to know that in the hands of users, it's not going to blow up. If you don't have any tests and you just deploy changes to millions of users, how do you think that's going to go?
Not good.
Right? Exactly. Like it's going to be a catastrophe. And if you don't have boundaries in place, the same thing will happen. It's exactly the same as not having any tests whenever you're deploying new features into your life. In my case, I had zero boundaries around becoming a parent. And that challenge has been really hard because, for the first year, probably after I had my son, I thought nothing in my life has changed. I just want to get back on track with my career progression. Like everything's fine. I can still do everything the same, which is not true. Any expectant parents to be reality check. Sorry about that. But the reality was that I didn't have protective boundaries in place. And with the perfectionism and the hard work bias, I would just keep working and working and working and not really taking a moment to recover, to replenish the resources. One of the things I talk about in the book too is thinking about your brain as a tool that you have, as your most valuable asset, because at its core, engineering and entrepreneurship too is about solving problems. And if you're running on empty, you're just inefficient or you're going to create buggy solutions. And that's going to come back to bite you.
Absolutely. Great advice. And so, very last chapter, and then we'll wrap it up. And this is something I see as well as self-marketing struggles where someone's just hanging on a cube back in the day. I don't know if they still have cubes. Everything's open space. And they're afraid to step up or speak up. Is that something you see very often? And how can people get over this struggle of self-marketing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's really about the refactoring of what you believe to be true about marketing. A lot of the time when I work with my clients, they see marketing. They have this marketing model in their mind that equates marketing to lying or deceiving people or being dishonest. And if they believe about themselves to be a person who's honest, who acts in integrity, which most of us do, then it's really hard to market yourself, if you compare the two models of yourself and the model of lying to other people or being dishonest. So we update the marketing model. That's really the biggest change that can cause the most improvement, is understanding that marketing yourself is more about educating other people about the value that you could potentially bring them in honesty and in integrity with what you believe to be true about yourself. Another way to think about it too is that a lot of the time we think that other people pay attention to what it is that we're doing. And they're not. Okay? So you are the center of your universe. Of course. But that's true for the other person as well. They are the center of their own universe. And they're not paying attention to you as much as you would think they do. So of course you need to take time to educate them about the value that you could bring, about the value that you could provide in order to help them jumpstart that new project, new fun project that they're trying to jumpstart in the company or whatever. But I think you got my drift here, Joe. The point is that if we can change the model of what we believe marketing is, that helps a lot.
Absolutely. And I think this is an essential resource. Everyone should have it. It has over almost 5-star reviews on Amazon. We'll have a link for it down below. But Dagna, if someone also wants to learn a little bit more coaching, maybe a little plug for what you all do, you read a book, that's fine, but actually implementing it is a lot harder. And I would assume having a coach will help you accelerate or even get through it. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am accepting new clients. So if you read my book and you're like, yes, I want to work with Dagna, there are exact steps outlined in the book in the chapter called Next Steps at the very end. You can find the information where to find me. Usually it's LinkedIn. That's the best place, but also the email address that you could reach out to and my website. I work with clients one-on-one in a 4-month package container. And I've seen people get incredible results just after the 4 months that we've been working together. I've seen people double their salary. I've seen people get a next job in a tough and bad economy that they thought themselves they would not be able to get a job. I've seen people get skip level promotions or get past impostor syndrome or get out of burnout in a very short time frame, because your brain is at the center of everything that you do. And if you can fix your brain, everything else will improve too.
Absolutely. It's a good point, though, in a tough economy like we're in now, where it's really a company can pick and choose. I think this is more important now than ever to get these skills under your belt, to get that next advancement or your next gig for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, Dagna, before we go, is there one piece of actionable advice you can give to someone to help them with their DevOps career efforts?
The best advice I can really offer is to pick up my book, pick up the worksheet that's attached to the book, and just go through it to refactor whatever's not working so you can accelerate and skyrocket your career.
No, it's great advice. There's a link within the book for the Brain Refactor workbook. So that's a great actionable piece of advice you could take away right now and do it for free for sure. And for links of everything of value we covered in this DevOps Toolchain show, head on over to testguild.com/P164. So that's it for this episode of the DevOps Toolchain show. I'm Joe. My mission is to help you succeed creating end-to-end full-stack DevOps Toolchain awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers. Hey, thank you for tuning in. It's incredible to connect with close to 400,000 followers across all our platforms and over 40,000 email subscribers who are at the forefront of automation, testing, and DevOps. If you haven't yet, join our vibrant community at testguild.com, where you become part of our elite circle driving innovation in software testing and automation. And if you're a tool provider or have a service looking to empower our guild with solutions that elevate skills and tackle real-world challenges, we're excited to collaborate. Visit testguild.info to explore how we can create transformative experiences together. Let's push the boundaries of what we can achieve.
The Test Guild Automation Testing Podcast. With lutes and lyres the bards began their song. A tune of knowledge, a melody of code. Through the air it spread like wildfire through the land, guiding testers, showing the secrets to behold.